There were whispers of a forest where the sun barely touched the earth, where the trees twisted like skeletal fingers, and where a beast roamed, leaving only blood and ruin in its wake. The Enchanted Forest, they called it, a place of ancient magic, cursed by time, untouched by mercy. No man who entered returned whole, if they returned at all. The village of Rellenford lay on the forest's edge, its people trapped in an endless cycle of fear. At night, the beast's howls echoed through the trees, and by morning, another farm was found in ruin. Livestock slaughtered, doors splintered, the scent of decay thick in the air. The villagers spoke of glowing eyes in the darkness, of claws longer than a man's arm, of a shadow that moved with unnatural silence. They had prayed, begged, and bargained with fate. No knight, no lord, no holy man dared to intervene. But fate had a cruel sense of humor, for salvation came not in the form of heroes, but in 3 men who had long abandoned the right to call themselves such. They rode in silence, cloaked in dust and the weight of their pasts. 3 men, once sworn to the banners of kings, now nothing more than blades for hire. Their armor, once polished steel, bore the wear of time, scratched, dented, and stripped of insignia. They had no lord, no home, only the road beneath their boots and the ghosts that followed them. The eldest of the 3, Garan, carried the look of a man who had long since lost faith in honor. His face was worn, his beard streaked with gray, and his hands calloused from decades of wielding steel. He had been a knight once, a commander even, but now he was a man who spoke little and killed without ceremony. Beside him, Thaddeus rode with the careful ease of a man who trusted no one, not even the horse beneath him. Lean and quiet, his eyes held a sharpness that suggested he was always thinking 3 steps ahead. His daggers were never far from reach, nor was his instinct for self-preservation. And then there was Doreen, the youngest of them, but no less dangerous. His sword was quick, his tongue quicker. There was a light in his eyes that neither Garan nor Thaddeus possessed anymore, something almost resembling hope, though he would never dare call it that. They had no destination, only the promise of food and shelter wherever their services were needed. Once, they might have fought for crowns and kingdoms, but that time had long passed. They had become something simpler, something less noble, mercenaries, travelers, scavengers of war-torn lands. It did not matter who they served, so long as the coin was good. The road to Rellenford was unremarkable, the dirt path winding through fields left untended. Signs of neglect were everywhere. Fences leaned, half-rotted and broken. Crops wilted in the fields, either abandoned or taken by unseen hands. The world felt hollow, drained of warmth, as if the land itself had lost its will to thrive. It was only when the village came into view that the silence turned to unease. The people stood in small clusters, watching the 3 riders with expressions that teetered between hope and despair. Their clothes were tattered, their faces worn by hunger and sleepless nights. There was no chatter, no laughter, only the occasional murmur, the distant cry of a child, the creak of old wood swaying in the wind. They did not cheer. They did not welcome the travelers as saviors. Instead, they waited to see if these men would be different, or if they, too, would turn their backs and leave them to their fate. The silence lingered as the 3 travelers slowed their horses to a halt at the village's entrance. Eyes peered from behind half-closed shutters, and figures huddled in doorways, as if expecting the wind itself to carry misfortune. A man stepped forward, older, draped in a threadbare cloak that might have once been fine. His posture was stiff, not with pride, but with the weight of desperation. A village elder, perhaps, or merely the one with the least fear left in him. "You are armed," he said, his voice hoarse with age or worry. Thaddeus scoffed, glancing down at the weapons strapped to their bodies. "We are," he said flatly. The elder did not waver. "Then you are men who can help." Garan exhaled through his nose, shifting in his saddle. "We're men who can be paid." A murmur rippled through the gathered villagers, but the elder's expression did not change. He had expected as much. "Then we will pay what we have." Doreen, ever the observer, scanned the village. He saw no fat livestock, no sacks of grain overflowing from storage. What little coin these people had would be meager at best. Even their weapons were pitiful, rusted farming tools, dull blades that had seen more years than blood. "What is it you need?" Dorian asked, though he already knew the answer. The elder hesitated only a moment before he spoke. "The beast," he said. "The one from the forest." A hush fell over the crowd. It was as if speaking the words aloud gave them weight, turned them into something real and unshakable. The elder continued. "It comes in the night, takes our livestock, tears through our homes. We have tried to fight, tried to drive it back, but—" His gaze flickered to a small group of men standing at the village's edge. 5, maybe 6 of them, all gaunt and pale. "We are not warriors." Thaddeus ran a gloved hand down his horse's mane, uninterested. "Many beasts roam the forests. Wolves, bears, perhaps a starving drake from the mountain pass. This is no wolf," the elder said. "It is large, faster than any man. Its eyes burn like embers. It kills for more than hunger. It kills for cruelty." A few villagers turned away, as if they could not bear to hear more. Garan shifted in his saddle, his face unreadable. "And why hasn't a lord sent his men? Why no hunters, no bounty posted?" The elder swallowed. "Because those who go into the forest do not return." The word sat heavy in the air. A challenge, a warning. Dorian leaned forward slightly. "How many have you lost?" The elder closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they shone with the kind of grief that had long since dried into something harder. "Too many." For the first time, the 3 travelers exchanged glances. None of them spoke, but something passed between them. They had seen many things in their time. Wars, betrayals, monsters of both man and nature. Yet there was something about this that felt different. The beast in the woods was more than just a threat. It was a thing of nightmares, a force that had stolen the spirit from an entire village. Still, there was the question of price. Garan sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired face. "Your people have little to offer." The elder did not argue. "We have what we have." Dorian looked toward the distant tree line, where the forest loomed like an unspoken promise. "And if we do this, then you will be remembered," the elder said. "Not as knights, not as mercenaries, but as the men who saved us when no one else would." The travelers were not men who cared for legacy, but they did care for coin. And more than that, they cared for challenges. Thaddeus smirked. "Then let's see what kind of monster we're dealing with." The decision was made. The forest awaited. The villagers gathered at the forest's edge, watching as the 3 travelers prepared to enter the shadowed realm that had haunted their nights. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared, faces etched with the kind of resignation that came from knowing men had walked this path before and never returned. Garan, Thaddeus, and Dorian stood before the tree line, their hands resting near their weapons. The forest loomed ahead, ancient and suffocating. The trees gnarled and twisted as if they had grown in defiance of nature itself. The air was thick with damp earth and something else, something metallic, like rusted iron, like blood. "We go in, we scout, we track," Garan said. His voice was steady, but even he did not pretend this would be simple. "No foolish risks. If we don't like what we find, we walk away." Dorian let out a low chuckle. "And if we do like what we find," Thaddeus smirked, "then we kill it." They stepped forward, swallowed by the darkness beneath the canopy. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No bird sang, no insects hummed. Even the wind refused to move through the leaves. The deeper they went, the more the light faded, until only slivers of a dying sun pierced through the dense foliage. Thaddeus knelt suddenly, his sharp eyes scanning the ground. The earth was disturbed, thick-clawed tracks sinking deep into the soil. Whatever had made them was massive, its steps heavy with purpose. Beside the prints were long, jagged grooves, marks that had been raked into the trees, as if the beast had sharpened its claws against the bark. "Fresh," Thaddeus murmured. He rose, expression unreadable. "It was here not long ago." Doreen exhaled slowly. "And it doesn't fear being seen." Garan pressed forward, his boots crunching over dead leaves. He had seen tracks like this before, in the aftermath of battle, when desperate creatures grew bold. But there was something calculated about these. This was not the path of a starving predator. It was a warning. The three moved deeper still, their hands brushing the hilts of their weapons. The further they walked, the more the forest changed. The trees grew closer together, their limbs woven like twisted fingers. Strange symbols had been carved into the trunks, old, crude markings that did not belong to any language they knew. Bones, some animal, some not, hung from the branches by frayed rope. The air smelled of rot and damp fur. Then they found it, a carcass, or what remained of it. A stag, its body torn open, its ribs splayed like the fingers of a broken hand. But it was not the kill itself that unsettled them. It was what had been done to it. The organs were missing, taken with precision. The eyes had been plucked from the skull, and around it, the dirt had been disturbed in strange, circular patterns, as if something had paced around its kill for hours, watching, waiting. "This isn't just a beast," Doreen muttered. His grip tightened on his sword. "It's something else." Garan said nothing, but his eyes drifted upward, scanning the trees, the shadows, the spaces where the light did not reach. The forest was watching them, and something was moving within it. A branch snapped. Not far. Garan turned sharply, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Thaddeus reached for a dagger, while Doreen shifted his stance, ready to draw. The air had changed, thick now, weighted with something unseen, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then came the growl, low, guttural, something that rumbled through the trees like distant thunder. It was not the sound of a starving beast. It was something worse, something that knew it was being hunted and did not care. The shadows moved. Thaddeus saw it first, a shape just beyond the reach of the dying light. Large, unnaturally so, its form stretching unnervingly between the trees. A pair of eyes burned in the darkness, deep and amber, like smoldering coals buried beneath ash. They did not flicker. They did not blink. They simply watched. "Not a wolf," Doreen muttered. The creature stepped forward. Its body was covered in coarse, matted fur, black as midnight, the strands clumped together with filth and dried blood. Its limbs were long, too long, each ending in clawed hands that dragged lightly across the earth. Its torso was thick with muscle, its back hunched, bones shifting beneath its hide as it moved with an unnatural grace. And its face, not quite wolf, not quite man. The snout was elongated, but not like that of a beast. Its jaw curved unnaturally, too sharp, filled with jagged teeth that glistened even in the dim light. It stood on two legs, its stance unnervingly human, but its breath, its presence, there was nothing human left in it. It let out another sound, something between a growl and a whisper, a noise that did not belong in the natural world. Then it stepped closer, closer. Dorian's fingers twitched near the hilt of his blade. "I don't suppose it'll let us leave in peace." "No," Garan murmured, eyes locked on the thing before them. "It won't." The beast lowered its head, its claws flexing against the earth. Its lips curled back, revealing those terrible, jagged teeth. Then it lunged. The monster moved faster than anything that size should have. One moment, it was crouched in the shadows. The next, it was upon them. Garan barely had time to pull his sword free before the thing's claws slashed through the air where his throat had been a second earlier. He threw himself back, boots skidding against damp earth. Thaddeus was quicker. His daggers flashed in the dim light as he darted to the side, slicing deep into the creature's flank. The blades struck true, but the beast did not cry out. It barely reacted. Instead, it whirled, its massive arms sweeping through the space Thaddeus had occupied a heartbeat before. He twisted, narrowly avoiding the strike, but the wind of it was enough to send him staggering. Doreen took the opening. He struck low, his sword carving a deep gash into the beast's leg. This time, it reacted. It let out a sound, not a roar, not a growl, but something worse. Something between a snarl and laughter, a broken, rattling noise that sent ice down Dorian's spine. Then it moved again. The beast lashed out, its claws raking across Dorian's chest. His armor saved him, but the force sent him flying, crashing into the underbrush. Garan stepped in, swinging his blade in a wide arc, aiming for the creature's neck. Steel met flesh. There was resistance, a moment where it felt as if the blade might bite deep. But then the beast twisted. It was fast, too fast. The sword scraped against its hide, drawing dark, sluggish blood. But before Garan could pull back, the creature grabbed him. Clawed fingers closed around his arm, iron strong, crushing. Garan gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to cry out. His free hand reached for his belt, fingers closing around the hilt of a dagger. With a sharp twist, he drove it into the beast's wrist. This time, it howled. The grip loosened just enough for Garan to wrench himself free, stumbling back. He glanced at Thaddeus, who had already moved, his twin daggers flashing as he struck again and again. The wounds barely seemed to slow the beast. It was like trying to cut through old, gnarled back, tough, unyielding. "This thing doesn't die easy," Thaddeus growled. Dorian, breathless, pulled himself to his feet. His sword was still in his hand, but there was a new look in his eyes. Understanding. Calculation. "It's playing with us," he said, voice grim. "It could have killed us already." The beast prowled before them, its massive frame shifting in the half-light. Its wounds bled, but they were shallow. Surface cuts. Nothing vital. It knew that. It was testing them. Garan adjusted his stance, flexing his sore arm. "Then we stopped playing." The three men moved as one. Thaddeus went low, aiming for the tendons in its legs. Dorian came from the side, driving his blade toward the ribs. And Garan stepped forward, waiting, watching, his sword poised for the killing blow. The beast snarled, tensing. And then, for the first time, it hesitated. The hesitation lasted only a second, but it was enough. Garan moved first. His sword flashed as he struck, aiming for the beast's throat. The creature twisted, but this time, it was not fast enough. The blade bit deep, slicing through thick muscle. Dark blood sprayed across the ground, steaming in the cold air. The beast roared, a sound of pain, of fury. Its burning eyes locked onto Garan with something almost like recognition. Then it lunged. Garan barely had time to brace before the impact sent him sprawling. The monster was on him, its massive weight pinning him down. Clawed hands slammed into his shoulders, pressing him into the dirt. Hot breath, rancid and heavy, filled his lungs as the beast opened its maw, jagged teeth, ready to tear into his throat. And then, Thaddeus struck. His dagger drove into the creature's ribs, deep and cruel. The beast howled, whipping around. That was its mistake. Dorian was waiting. With every ounce of strength, he drove his sword upward, straight into the creature's exposed chest. The blade sank deep. The beast stiffened, its body jerking as if caught in some unseen force. Its claws twitched, its breath shuddered. The burning light in its eyes flickered, once, twice, before finally dimming. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the beast collapsed. The weight lifted off Garan as the creature's body slumped to the ground, its breath rasping, shallow and broken. Its limbs twitched, claws digging into the dirt as if refusing to accept defeat. But the wound was mortal. It was dying. Garan sat up slowly, chest heaving. Blood dripped from his arm, from his side, but he ignored it. His eyes were locked on the monster, the thing that had terrorized the village, the thing that had hunted the woods unchecked. Now, it was nothing more than a fading nightmare. Thaddeus knelt beside it, breathing hard. He watched as its body convulsed one final time before going still. That, he muttered, wiping blood from his face, was unpleasant. Dorian pulled his sword free, his expression unreadable. It wasn't just a beast. Garan said nothing. He already knew. The way it had fought, the way it had watched them, there had been something behind those burning eyes. Something intelligent, something ancient. But now, it was dead, and the forest was silent once more. The forest was still. No wind stirred the trees. No distant cries echoed through the night. Even the usual hum of unseen creatures lurking in the undergrowth had vanished. It was as if the entire woodland was waiting, watching, holding its breath. The three men stood over the corpse, their bodies aching, their breaths ragged. Dark blood pooled beneath the beast, seeping into the roots, staining the earth. It should have felt like a victory. The villagers would be safe. The thing that had hunted them was dead. And yet, Garan narrowed his eyes at the creature's face. Even in death, something about it unsettled him. The strange way its lips curled, almost as if it had been smiling. The way its lifeless eyes, though dimmed, still seemed to glimmer with some hidden knowing. "We should burn it," Thaddeus muttered, voice low. Doreen nodded. "Make sure it doesn't get back up." Garan hesitated. Something inside him, something instinctual, something primal, told him fire wouldn't be enough. And then he saw it. The wound, the gash in the beast's chest, the one Doreen had driven his sword through, was closing. Not completely, not fast, but the edges of the flesh were knitting together, barely perceptible, slow as creeping ivy. A chill ran through Garen's bones. "We need to go," he said, sharper than intended. Thaddeus frowned. "What? Why?" Garan didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. He only knew that something was wrong, that something was not finished, that the thing lying at their feet was not entirely dead. Doreen looked at him, then at the body. His eyes darkened. "The village will want proof. They'll have to settle for our word." Thaddeus let out a short, humorless laugh. "That'll go over well." But Garan was already moving. "Leave it," he ordered. "Now." Doreen did not argue. Thaddeus lingered only a moment before following. They did not look back. By the time they reached the village, the sky was beginning to lighten. The first hints of dawn stretched thin across the horizon, casting the world in muted golds and purples. They had survived. They had done what they came to do. And yet, as the three former knights walked through the village square, past homes now safe from the nightmare that had haunted them, none of them spoke. Because deep in the forest, where the sunlight did not reach, the body of the beast still lay in the dirt. Motionless, silent, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, its fingers twitched,